communities that actually matter in a totally distracted world. My name is JT O'Donnell. I'm the founder and CEO of Work It Daily and the host of the Pro Voice podcast. And today I have Dwight Spencer, community strategy consultant and creative business coach, Jerry Rice, employee engagement and global communications executive, and Rhonda Simpson, leadership coach and organizational engagement executive. Welcome, Pro Voicers. So good to have you back on the show. We're going to do a mic check. We always like to start off with that, just to make sure everything's working okay over there. And so what I want to hear in just 20 words or less is share a defining moment when you made a genuine and authentic connection in what I would say is a difficult or challenging time. Let's kick it off with you, Dwight.
Yeah, I have made genuine connections with artists and creators of all types in spaces where they were following a script of just trying to let their work do the talking. And I offered them a pattern interrupt and planted the seed that uh, their patrons want to actually have access to them. They want a piece of them. The art just comes along with the deal.
I love that. I love talk about that. You talk that moment like a disruptive moment, an interrupting moment. What's an example of that?
Well, we all have certain patterns that we've seen modeled, and they are cliche. And, whenever you go into a new setting, the default reflex is to say, "So what do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
And that is the absolute worst question that you can do in those situations. What you can hope for is that the person being asked is able to take that through a filter where they can sort of redirect and make it so that they're sharing with you a generative question that they are granting you the grace of you having asked instead. Like, what are you interested in? What lights you up? What fills your days? What are you excited about?
Okay, I just got to comment on that because I agree with you, and I've told people for years that when I lived in Europe, nobody asked you, "What do you do?" It's kind of an American thing. They would ask me, "What do I like to do? What my hobbies were?" You barely knew what people did for work there, and I think it's interesting and so true that people get patterned based on the reaction to that beautiful example. And clearly, your mic is working just fine this morning, Dwight. Jerry, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Dwight. I actually had a college professor in grad school who talked about pattern interrupt, and he would always come in with some crazy question or just some off the wall statement to start a conversation instead of just "How are you doing today?" So I love that. I think my example, we built community through the COVID pandemic. So we took crisis and turned it into opportunity. We allowed our CEO to become sort of the voice of fact and reason in a sea of misinformation through open and authentic communication. We did weekly videos out to the community, and then we wanted to hear back from everybody to see how they were doing throughout what was a really, really difficult time for a lot of people.
You know, I always say the bigger the disruption, the bigger the innovation. And I think COVID brought around some absolutely incredible innovation and in that space in particular, which I love. Amazing. Your mic's working just fine as well. Rhonda, what about you?
Well, one thing that I like to do is when things seem really maybe extra busy, semi chaotic in our daily work, I like to take kind of a moment and just ask random people, "How are you doing?" And I know this goes against kind of this pattern thing we were just talking about, but generally, people will say, "I'm doing fine." But then I like to follow it up with, "Okay, but how are you really doing?" And that kind of like makes people stop. And then it's amazing what you get when you ask it like the second time with more of a genuine curiosity. And that has been kind of my go to for a number of years now. And I feel like it's really helped me to connect with people kind of on the fly.
I think it is a pattern interrupt in the sense that you don't let it go with
Yeah,
the surface answer, right? Like
right,
they're not expecting you to follow up and say, no, no, but really, how are you? You know, which I
right.
love. And again, mic working just fine. And folks already, please, you better be taking notes because these are the things you could be doing right now to be making better, authentic connections and having a more lasting impression. So let's get into Signal Boost. This is the part of the show where each of you gets to talk about a tool, a framework, a book, something that you want to give a shout out to. In this particular case, I'd like to hear about something that you feel is really helping with building authentic connection in communities that matter. So let's jump to you, Jerry.
Yeah. So in the world of communication and employee engagement, you hear a lot about AI, right? And everyone's trying to build AI into everything. But there are some really good tools where AI is really making a difference. And one example right now is being able to better kind of find and frame your audience. So in a big company of 22,000 people, you've got all kinds of people doing different things. They're working in finance, they're working in IT. Maybe they're working directly with your customers, or maybe they're managing people. And I think that's a really big place of opportunity right now is how do you put the tools in the hands of your managers to help them answer employee questions if a big announcement comes out, if you're announcing a merger, if you're God forbid you're going through layoffs or something like that. You can identify with AI who has kind of a manager role and has people reporting to them, and you can simultaneously send them the message that's going out to the entire company and also put in kind of a Q&A or an FAQ into their hands. So when their employees come to them with questions and concerns, they're prepared to answer them. And they understand and know all the answers to the questions that they might get. So AI making a huge difference if you're using it correctly and really looking for those opportunities where it can make a difference.
It also allows them to anticipate what they know will be the questions. And instead of misinformation or disinformation amongst people being distributed, you get to really control the narrative by putting that extra insight out there, which I absolutely love. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
And in a vacuum, people make it up, right? So you have to give them the real answers.
Yeah, and the telephone game too, right? 9 things later, you're like, that's not true, right? This point it's out though, so you've got to control it. I love that. All right, let's jump over to you, Rhonda.
Well, one of my big things over the last, I don't know, probably 8 years or so is looking at Brene Brown's research on vulnerability and connections. That has been really pivotal for me in understanding that people really want to feel heard, seen, and even valued in organizations. And when you understand that, it really goes much deeper than that, because once you achieve having people feel seen and heard and valued, which is a very hard thing to get to, but once you're on that road, then people start connecting their work to the actual company vision, or more of the purpose in what they're doing. They get less passive in what they're doing. So I really, really have appreciated her outstanding research on all things that she's done with courage and vulnerability. It's been huge in my professional development as well.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it started out as personal for her, but I think so much of what she's done is translated into the professional world, which is fantastic, right? And greatly needed, as you pointed out, for those reasons. Yes. Super stuff. Dwight, what are you shouting out?
I cannot speak highly enough about the frameworks and just the methods for being able to better connect and better understand what might be happening in an exchange, as modeled by Charles Duhigg in Super Communicators. It's so key that we can stop speaking past each other and just have a clearer understanding of what's actually happening in a situation. And he outlines very simple frameworks for being able to have clearer communication and to connect better and to allow people to feel seen and heard.
If you've ever observed a conversation with two people where you realize they're actually not listening to one another, which right, you know what I'm talking about. Everyone just had one of those conversations pop into their head right now, right? That's exactly what I thought of when you talked about that, and how important it is that we get back to really listening and connecting in conversations. It's kind of scary to me, and I don't know where we fell off the rails, but I feel like I've never seen it as bad as it is right now. Which leads into, after a very quick sponsor break, we're going to come back to Work It or Waste It, and the topic is, are all these digital networking events and online communities helping or hurting authentic connection? Come back and find out. Welcome back. It's time for Work It or Waste It, where my incredible experts here are going to discuss the pros, cons, good and bad and ugly, of digital worlds, the digital connecting and networking. Has it like removed all the authentication and authenticity and connection we used to have in person? Is there a place for it? I want to get each and every one of your thoughts. Let's start off with Rhonda.
Well, I do think that we are drowning in surface level connections for sure. And I think that it kind of goes back to our hurried pace in just our life and the feeling that if we have a lot of maybe followers or likes on, social media platforms, that then we're really serving a purpose. But really, in reality, we're just wasting our energy on things that really don't matter. Like, what are we getting from those numbers? I like to think, right? And so it kind of building a presence in what you're actually doing. So, really understanding, okay, what is going to help me in the long run? And, it might mean feeling a little vulnerable in reaching out to somebody, making the first attempt to connect with somebody that truly like, means something to your work. And I think that when you can do that, that you can get to the heart of your purpose better. And I think that's why there is such a rise of smaller communities that share more of a common vision in things, because people are really looking for the shared purpose. They're looking for the trust. They're looking for those experts that they can really rely on to, help them professionally.
Yeah, as somebody who runs online communities, one of the things that I'm most proud of is when people say, this isn't like other communities. I'm actually getting results. I'm making connections. I'm feeling heard and understood. And I think we have to be so careful, to your point, why are you here? And what are you doing it for? And is the effort that you're making in alignment with that? And more people have to, follow their intuition on that, or they're not going to get what they need out of these sort of digital environments, which can offer massive value if done correctly, I think. So I love what you shared. Dwight, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I know that we suffer from a great deal that competes for our attention in any waking moment. And so it's difficult for people to even just be on the same page or even recall exactly what it was that they were attending to, because in the space between the start and the final execution, there will be so many different distractions that will have gotten in the way, and we're not built to handle the amount of distraction that has become routine. It doesn't matter how remote you might think that you are. These days it's kind of like it's become normalized for the average person to feel like they're walking in the middle of Times Square or on the Vegas Strip. And it's just in the course of doing their normal things. There's so many things that are going to be able to send you alerts, and so many ways that people are able to reach you. And there was a time when, the speed of communication was as fast as letters could be carried across the ocean or on horseback. And that's kind of the pace that I think that we have the capacity for. And it's really hard for people to fall in, or to it's really easy for people to fall in love with the fact that they are always on and they always have access, when they really just need to take a moment to unplug and listen within.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think about a digital detox, the concept's like only in the last 10 years and came out of necessity, right? As people start to figure out their boundaries with technology. Meanwhile, as you were talking, my smartphone watch is dinging at me. So we got to love that moment, right? We'll just try to put that behind my back. I love it. Jerry, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think building on what Dwight said, we're in this sea of noise, and so if you can offer consistent, valuable communication that is meaningful to your audience, you're going to cut through some of that clutter. And I think the key word in that last sentence is valuable. You really have to listen to your audience or the people that you're trying to reach and understand how to meet them where they are. And a lot of people, I mean, I get so many emails that just go straight into the junk bin, right? That are 5 emails a day from a company that's trying to sell me stuff that I bought 3 weeks ago, and it's like I don't need that. Like you're not drumming up business really by just spamming me every day, 5 times a day. So if you're really thoughtful, and there are so many companies that are out there doing it well, if you're thoughtful about how you're communicating with people and you're caring more about what they need versus what you want to do or what you think you should do, you're going to win the day. In our current society, where people are learning to tune that stuff out and turn off notifications that they don't want and direct things into the spam email box immediately and just automatically. So listen to what your audience needs and be authentic and be valuable.
Yeah. Business wise, I think you can, if you're more intentional, like you talked about, you don't need as many customers or as many leads, so to speak, because the connection rate, the response rate, the results rate are going to be so much better because you dialed in on that. I agree with you. I just think it's so counterintuitive, right? Everybody just keeps throwing more out there. Email more, message more. So, well, that was great. Work and Wasted. I think everybody's in agreement here about us being a lot more mindful about how we go about this. Now let's get into in your industry, because each of you come from a different industry, and I'd really like to hear how it's being tackled in your industry, what you see being different or better in the way that people are building authentic connection. And Jerry, we're going to pick on you first.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing right now is probably two-way communication. So it builds a little bit on what I said before. So authentic two-way communication instead of top-down. So if you're in an organization, my sweet spot is employee engagement and employee communication. So if you're leading an organization and the only communication you're doing is email blasts outward, you're really missing an opportunity. And I've kind of implemented at the last couple of companies that I've worked for and really helped with their communication, kind of borrowing this idea from Reddit of ask me anything. So these sessions where employees can come in and ask questions just to get to know people personally. Like, how do you get to know your leaders more personally and just understand them as human beings and not just, in a leadership position. And then, you get your tough questions answered too. Like you put them in the hot seat a little bit and you make them squirm sometimes, and they have to answer the tough questions face to face. But that creates really important moments. The fact that they're willing to be there and show up and listen to their people and answer their questions and really, it makes a big difference from a leadership role rather than just kind of top-down communication.
I love it. Dwight, what about you?
One thing that's always been an issue in any kind of a creative space is that there's a tendency to want to think of things in terms of products, getting to the end. And where the magic happens is really getting in love with the process. And that's a really hard thing to change when there are so many things that are pushing people toward deadlines, whether artificial or the reality of things that people face. And a lot of the gold gets left in the bin because people fail to appreciate that where the real value comes and what they're doing isn't necessarily in what's delivered, but all of the growth happens on the way there, and those are the things that lead to being able to level up what it is that they're able to produce in subsequent projects.
Amazing. I love it. Rhonda, thoughts?
I want to piggyback off of a little bit of what Jerry said and a little bit of what Dwight said. It kind of ties into my thoughts. Jerry, you were talking about, having office hours or, allowing people just to ask questions when on the spot. And that for leadership can be very uncomfortable, especially when they're really hard questions, right? But yet, when you create that environment, people tend to feel like they can connect a little bit more with leaders that are doing that are putting themselves out there. And then to Dwight's point of, kind of the process, leaving those gold nuggets, the process of connecting and building relationships and things is sometimes very difficult, and again sometimes very uncomfortable. And the saying that that's where you get growth, is when you're uncomfortable. And I think that that is really important to allow others to see that you're actually putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, and then others will also see whether you're growing or not. And I think that's really important, because to my thoughts really more about this question, is people within the organization will oftentimes feel like they don't matter, that everything that matters is at the senior level. And so when you're actually making those connections with those people that don't feel like they matter, and they're having positive experiences with more senior leadership, what happens is they're starting to have these seeds of trust that are being planted. And one thing that I think comes from that is every time that happens, their perception of senior leadership changes slightly. It doesn't change overnight, changes very slightly. And so over time, their experiences become maybe a little more positive. And you think about organizations, oftentimes negativity spreads. The rumor mill is cranking things out just at a high rate. And when you have people throughout your organization that have those positive experiences because they've connected with senior leaders, they can kind of counteract some of that negativity. And so I like to think of it as just, it's a process. And like Dwight said, just, don't lose those gold nuggets during that process.
You know what? So you hit on something near and dear to my heart, and I think all of you really summarized the fact that we need authenticity right now, but it doesn't happen without accessibility. So you have to make yourself available, and again, put yourself in those vulnerable moments of, I might not have the answer right now, or this might be an uncomfortable conversation, but that is the only way that you build trust. And it blows my mind how many people want to be behind that door or be completely rehearsed because they want to be perfect. And all they do is create distance, right? They create disconnect. And all it takes is one executive to do the wrong thing in the wrong place and not have that relationship with everybody. Then
Yes.
why would they give them the benefit of the doubt? They've had no opportunity to see their authentic self or have access to them, as you were talking about, Rhonda, which means it's very easy to decide, they're a bad person.
Right.
And then you see them make the apology tour and it doesn't work because they have no connection, right? There's been nothing there. So I hope everybody listening to this understands how important this is right now in the business world, that people are not thinking about that factor. Great segment. I love it, folks. When we come back, you're all going to get to do your power pitch on being authentic in this area. But first, we need a word from our sponsors. All right. All right, we're back. It's power pitch time. Each of you is going to get 30 seconds to tell me your philosophy on building authentic connection. Dwight, we're going to pick on you first.
All right. Well, authenticity is wrapped up in a lot of things that I'm involved with. My work with For the Love of Creatives is built around building authentic connections in a transactional world. And it's swimming upstream, but I find that the quality of what comes out of making real connections far exceeds what happens from just having the quantity that comes from your typical business card exchanges.
Love it. Rhonda, your take?
I think that practicing intentional curiosity is huge in whatever we're doing. So instead of, if we're on, online, instead of just passive commenting or liking things, look at something and genuinely ask a question because you really want to know the answer. And then I think the hard part is to actually sit back and listen, or take that information in after you ask a genuine question and practice genuine curiosity.
Love it. And Jerry, your take.
I'll probably say this phrase on every podcast, but don't let perfection be the enemy of connection. So you should be prepared when you get out in front of an audience and when you get out in front of your employees. You should have something that you want to share and say. But if you've rehearsed every word, you're missing an opportunity to have an actual dialogue with people, to read the room, to figure out, like, how is this landing and how do I need to shift it and change it? And maybe I'm seeing like faces that are not they're not reacting the way I thought they would, and so I've got to figure out why, right, in the moment. But if you're rehearsed and you're coming out with this polished presentation, you're just going to follow that script and go straight through the presentation. You're going to miss the opportunity to communicate.
And you know that I want swag for this podcast, and I think you just came up with our next T-shirt and poster idea. Could you just say that phrase one more time, Jerry?
Yes, don't let perfection be the enemy of connection.
And
I
there
would
it
love
is.
to see that on a T-shirt.
I would too. Okay, folks, we're going to make that one happen. It's great. I can't believe it, but we are at mic drop moment, the final segment where each of you is going to give some incredible parting wisdom. What's the one thing you want everyone listening today to take away and do with respect to this idea of authentic connection? Rhonda, you're up.
I think really it starts with courage. Courage is something that I think we oftentimes discount. And having the courage to show up, be seen, not be rehearsed, maybe, like Jerry said, sometimes just being there is huge. And that's kind of been my mantra, is just to be, courageous in anything that I do.
I love it. Dwight, what about you? What do you think?
I have to wholeheartedly agree. You want to lean into just being who you are at your core, and you may not always get it right, and that's a part of it.
Yeah.
You need to be willing to own up to where you've gotten it wrong, where you might have stepped on toes and hurt feelings, and that's how we all grow.
Incredible. And Jerry, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say communication is a lot more about listening than speaking. We all know those people, and we talked about it earlier, that they know what they want to say, or they're forming what they want to say rather than listening to the person across from them. And if you're not listening, you're not communicating.
Incredible advice. Thank you so much to my 3 Pro Voice experts here today, folks. All of them can be found on Subs, our partner. And Subs is an incredible platform that lets you put each one of these experts in your back pocket for the cost of a cup of coffee. You can message them on an unlimited basis directly and get the answers you need. So please check them all out on subs.com. And remember, until next time, if you want to win, you've got to work it daily. But more importantly, if you want to be seen, heard, and in demand, you've got to use your Pro Voice.